Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would chat with you guys a little bit about weak point training and specializing and fixing your weak points. So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Now, when I say weak point training, people are going to be like, wait, what are you talking about? Are you talking about strength? Are you talking about hypertrophy? What are you talking about? They're all connected, guys. I mean, I don't know how many times this has to be said for people who don't grasp this. If we did not have massive amounts of anabolics out there and machines and stuff available, no one would even know the difference between the two, right? You would not be able to tell strength and hypertrophy apart if we didn't have such an environment as to where you could train muscles in a way that doesn't build your support musculature. So in other words, your squat might not go up from doing nothing but leg extensions and leg presses significantly, because you would have other weak links. And if we didn't have large amounts of anabolics that can skew size to strength ratios, no one would even be having that conversation. So when we talk about that, they are essentially the same thing. And a muscular development weak point will limit your strength. It will limit your strength. So I mean, if you have a weak muscle, that's an important muscle in one of your movement patterns, it will impact your performance. You're going to be weaker. And by that same token, if you're strong at all of the movement patterns, you're going to have a well-developed musculature anyway. So they really go hand in hand. You can't fully separate them. So let's get that point out of the way first before we jump further into that. Now, that being said, I was discussing yesterday about how full body training can help you specialize, a bit more. And here's the thing that always confuses me. You know, when we start talking about frequency and volume and everything else, what is it that everyone always wants to do? They think that when they have a weak point, they're like, I just need to add more volume one day a week to that weak point, right? So let's say their biceps or their triceps are a weak point, because arms are a really common weak point for most guys, arms or chest or something like that. Of course, usually it's their lower body, but they don't want to address that. So I'll stick with the ones that people believe are oftentimes are weak points. Let's take something like arms, for example. We can use that as an example. And they'll say, well, I just need to add more sets on my arm day. But is that really going to give you the desired result? Well, yeah, possibly. Training volume does impact muscle growth, right? The more workload, effective workload. So not just mindless reps, because you start looking at really high reps, what do we know? You pretty much almost have to go to muscle failure to get any growth. We know, based upon all the data I've seen out there, that the only reps that stimulate muscle growth are the last 5 reps towards muscle failure. So if you're lifting a weight that is your absolute 10 rep max, you don't even start stimulating growth till rep 6. So when we're talking about volume, we're talking about quality volume. So I mean, just coming in and doing 5 sets of 20 with your 25 rep max isn't going to do anything. You're not going to gain a single drop of muscle from that. So when we're talking about quality reps, actual fatiguing, challenging reps, that's what we're talking about for volume. And it doesn't matter whether you're doing it with singles, because I mean, doing a bunch of singles with 90% of your max will absolutely stimulate hypertrophy, right? Doing a bunch of triples with your 5 rep max will stimulate hypertrophy. Of course, doing 5 rep sets with your 5 rep max will stimulate even more, but you guys get the idea. We're talking about total quality volume. So what I would say is that, no, you don't necessarily need to just add more volume in one day. You need more weekly volume and frequency. If something is truly a weak point, let's say your biceps or your triceps are an absolute weak point, you need to be training them every single time you're at the gym. So let's say you're doing 3 or 4 days a week of training, you need to be hitting them every time. If you're doing full body 3 days a week, hey, that's great. It'll be easy to hit them every time you're at the gym, right? Very, very easy. You just need to add more volume and maybe address some movement pattern deficiencies, right? Because what a lot of times people will do, they'll try to just isolate a muscle that's a weak point. I don't think that's the solution there, because most of these muscles have multiple joint insertions and they actually benefit from it. Like biceps, for example, are involved in more than just this. Now, people will talk about, supination and pronation of the wrist. That's not really a movement pattern for the bicep, though. It's not necessary for growth. It's just there's a different stretch versus contraction on that. So technically, yeah, a dumbbell would give the fullest range of motion because you can pronate. And when you're pronated, it does put more stretch on the bicep at the bottom than the supinated. The supinated allows for more contraction. So hypothetically, yes. But there's more to it than that. The bicep, realistically, It's not just this. It also, because it's connected in a different way up in the shoulder, go look at an anatomy chart. You'll see what I'm talking about. There is shoulder movement involved. That's one of the reasons things like cheek curls or curls where you come up to here, where you move the actual shoulder, or things like weighted chin-ups, weighted pull-ups actually have such a potent growth stimulator there, is because they're addressing one of the other functions of the bicep, right? And that's even more pronounced with the tricep, isn't it? Because you start looking at the long head, the stretch reflex and everything involved with it, the tricep actually needs even more shoulder movement to get complete activation. Because the long head is very, very minimally contracted, and it's possibly the biggest head of the three. It doesn't get sufficient contraction just from elbow movement, right? Elbow extension. It doesn't. So the tricep is definitely should not be isolated. I mean, if you're trying to get bigger triceps, trying to isolate that muscle would be about the most stupid thing you could possibly do. All right, let's be realistic here. The tricep is not designed for just one movement pattern. That's not how it's inserted. That's not how it's built. That's not how it functions. So to think that you're going to isolate it with a single joint exercise, you're actually going to get less development. It's probably the most ignorant thing you could possibly do. So that being said, we need to address these deficiencies. I'd say that's a lot of what you need to do. If you have a lagging body part and maybe it's not getting sufficient development, you need to be thinking in terms of those things. Let's say it's your triceps and you even are doing full body right now, right? You're doing full body. And you've been doing the bench press and the overhead press and it's still lagging. Well, maybe you need to add another exercise that works more of the long head. Maybe you need a tricep extension that involves, again, moving your shoulder joint so that you put that stretch on the long head. Maybe you need to add more volume of that on every single workout. And conversely, we fall into the same thing. What if you're doing an upper-lower split or a push-pull or something like that? Well, you better work your weak points every time you're at the gym. In other words, if your biceps are a weak point and it's your lower body day, guess what? You probably should do some weighted chin-ups. You should do some cheek curls. You should do some incline curls with a shoulder movement involved. You should probably be training it every time you're at the gym, including your squat and deadlift day, because it's your weak link. You need more total frequency and more total volume, because just adding frequency on one day, keep in mind, guys, muscle protein synthesis is only elevated for 48 hours at the most if you're not on drugs. That's the limit. And you're probably not even doing that without a lot of volume. So all you're doing by adding it into one day is not giving you the same potential as you would as if you added more volume into your total frequency. That frequency and volume are both massive factors in muscle growth for naturals. They absolutely are, or even moderate users. So yeah, you need to be training it every time you're there. And I'd go out on a limb and say in some cases, if your recovery will allow for it, you need to be working your weak points in some way, maybe even on your days off. Even if it's with modest stuff, like let's say your delts are a weak link and you've got bands at home. Well, maybe you should do some band face pulls, which do work the medial and posterior head of the delt, right? They work those heads of the delt very effectively. Maybe you could be doing some band face pulls every day at home to failure. Maybe that's something you could do if your delts are really a weak link for you. If your biceps or your lats are, maybe you should be doing some greasing the groove stuff, some pull-ups or chin-ups at home every single day, so that you're continually stimulating that weak point so that it is getting maximum stimulation, so that you are hitting the maximum recoverable volume with quality work, quality exercises for that weak link. And I don't mean throw random crap at it. I think that's the worst thing you can do is, well, I'm going to do 5 different exercises for this weak link. No, you probably just need 2 or 3 exercises for it. You just need to work harder on them. You need to do more volume on them, and you need a lot more frequency on them, most likely. I'm going to say for a lot of people, it's not working the full movement pattern of that muscle that's maybe your genetic weak link with enough frequency and enough weekly volume. You probably need to be maximizing both if you legitimately feel something is a weak link. I mean, and I'm addressing that right now, guys. All 3 of my full body workouts, I do weighted pull-ups, right? And I'm doing cheek curls because my biceps are a weak link for me. I'm doing both of those. But now on my off days, I'm doing greasing the groove. I'm doing pull-ups pretty much every day on my off days with just body weight. Again, just adding more volume for that weak muscle group and getting that stretch on it, because I do them from a dead hang with a pronated grip, getting that stretch on it and using my back, because my back is probably arguably my most developed body part on my whole body. And so for me, using my lats and my back and everything to go ahead and help me do more workload on the biceps, that's what I'm doing there. But I'm still doing the cheat curls, so a multi-joint curl, and I'm doing the pull-ups, weighted pull-ups on my big workouts, and then I'm doing normal pull-ups on my off day. So that's an example of weak point training, of saying, hey, that's an area that needs to come up, I need to work on it, so let me make sure it's getting varied stimulation, all functions of the muscle are being worked, and I'm doing so with as much frequency and volume as I can get away with. So that's definitely one way to address it. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.